Hello everyone and welcome to a new video. This time we'll be taking a look at Heroes Light and Shadow. Even though the title doesn't really make sense since that's referencing FE11, whereas this is New Mystery of the Emblem, obviously, because Kris is not exactly present in FE11, at least from what my memories recall. Anyway, this video should have come out a bit earlier today. I kind of decided to just take it slow and just relax a bit more though. This banner is, honestly, I'm mostly disappointed. Kris is not a character I very much like. A very self-insert based character never really appeals to me. And the fact that this is the most self-insert that has ever self-inserted itself in Fire Emblem is, wow. Not exactly too fond of it. My opinion of it sour even more when I realized just how fucked up what they ended up doing for Female Kris was. But, well, that's a topic for later in the video. Overall, this banner is, it has one good unit, one very good unit, one worse than another unit, and then a pretty decent unit, and then there's Lena. Honestly, it's kind of sad, really, because it's a really good batch of characters, right? Lena is, well, actually, let's move on to her. This is a really good art, by the way, for Lena. I think this is, like, probably my favorite art of the banner. And the sad part about this is that I can't even, like, get interested or invested in her or just, like, building her in general, because, boy, that line is, that's depressing. In a world where 3235 is on a 3 to 4 star unit, and she appears as a 5-star with 4-star focus, it's, wow, ooh, yeah. I know she's gonna become a 3 to 4 star later, but why would you build her when Amaran exists, is my question. There's so many problems. Healers in general really just has this weird problem of, ooh, we cannot give pref staff, and this banner really solidified this because of Aramia. Aramia is a major antagonist in the game she's from. She basically sets up very, like, 3 other antagonists of that story, and she's basically a puppet from Garneth. The thing is, Aramia is a major antagonist, and even she did not get a pref. Let's take a look at the 4 units who actually got a pref, that are healers. Loki, Bridal Fjorm, okay, Brave Veronica, Brave Camilla. Can you see the problem here? 2 of them are OCs, and the other 2 are Brave Heroes. Yes, to me, it basically means if a major antagonist is not good enough to get a pref, despite the fact that she deserves one, and should have one, and, you know, doesn't get one, and Lena obviously is even less likely to ever get this, and even Gen 1 healers don't get pref, it tells me you need to be a Fe OC or a Brave Hero to get an actual staff. This is just depressing. Anyway, back to Lena. As far as units are concerned, as far as fodder even is concerned, Attack Ploy is cool. It's finally in the pool. You have to 5-star her for it, though. I wish I was making this up, but no. Attack Ploy right here is still... You still have to 5-star her for Attack Ploy 3. Which is kind of disappointing. In all honesty, I feel like the ploys are still good. Unlike what most people say. I do think ploys are still very solid skill overall. The problem with them, however, is the fact that, well, while they are good, they should not be looked to 5-star. Like, they are not like Wrath level of good, where 5-starring a unit for the skill is actually, like, not a bad idea. It simply isn't. So, it just makes me kind of sad to see this happen. I believe Rest Smoke was kind of the same, but it was easier to forgive. Because the thing with Rest Smoke is that Forest has this, right? And you want to know the only other units that have it? All 5-star exclusives. So, yeah. And we never got a GHB giving Rest Ploy. Attack Ploy came on Oliver as well as, I believe, Julius. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it's pretty okay for, you know, them not to have access to it. It makes sense, right? It makes sense because, you know, for Rest Ploy, it makes sense because we just never had a source of it, really. But when it comes down to Attack Ploy, we already had sources of it, so the fact that it's luck to 5-star is, wow. Especially when that skill has already been available at 4-star with Julius, like 3 years ago. Well, probably not 3, more like 2, but you get my point. But yeah, I mean, there's not much else to say here. Let's go to comparisons, also known as Goddamn Massacre. So, yeah. I wanted to showcase Mercedes for the obvious reason that she is basically everything Lena would want to be. She has more attack, she has more speed, and not by a whole lot, but she does. Despite the fact that she is a gen behind, the def and res is very similar. At the end of the day, I would say Lena is slightly better, and that's me not comparing her to Emran. The main reason I'm not comparing her to Emran, though, is really simple. First off, Emran is newer. Mercedes is a character a lot of people have invested into because Mercedes is just, well, a very good character in Three Houses. Mostly character-wise. She is very sweet, very caring, and people tend to like her for it, me included. So a lot of people have already built her. The point I'm trying to get here is Lena can get fairly close to Mercedes. And yes, overall I would say Lena is slightly better than Mercedes. However, if you already have a Mercedes at high merges, just continue the project and don't give a fuck about Lena. At the end of the day, they do very, very, very similar thing. Mercedes' res is still high enough to proy, and so is Lena's. So it doesn't fucking matter which one you pick. However, if you want to use sabotage skills, Lena will be able to pull that off. Mercedes won't really be able to pull that off all too well. That's really the main thing that's different. Everything else is very similar, if not the same. As for Azama here, Azama is overall better bulk. At the end of the day, res is not exactly a problem, because if you're talking about Azama, you're talking about bulk, right? If you're building Lena for bulk, she is inferior to Azama because def is more important than res, for the most part. Because casters don't really appear in AA, it's mostly physical unit, and otherwise it's dragons, and dragons hit your def anyway because your res is, you know, much higher. So, you know, as a result, I'd say Azama is a bit better. And you can't even bring the ploy/sabotage example because you will use Fortress Def Res on Azama. So as a result, obviously, your res is going to be just fine at 41. So, you know, in general, I would say Azama is very similar, if not slightly better than Lena, just because very easy to have, very easy to merge. The speed is basically the same. The attack being lower, the only thing Lena really has with that over Azama is the fact that she will heal for more. But that can also, like, bite you in the ass if you are using her in, say, AR defense, because then she will prioritize attacking instead of healing. The way AI works, for those who are new here, this is very simple and very rudimentary, but any characters that do less than 5 damage will not really prioritize attacking. For example, if you're dealing with someone with a rally, right? And you try to bait them, right? You try to just bait them normally, and said unit would do no damage. Instead of attacking, it's going to rally 100% of the time, even if there's no one else in range to attack you with. Rally is all that will happen. Healing is very similar, it's just that it's going to be healing instead. That said, if there's no one to heal, well, it's going to attack, obviously, if he's isolated. Otherwise, he's going to be the last one to attack, which can be pretty useful in certain cases. Unless, obviously, you use Dazzle, in which case he will be one of the first to attack. So you can kind of manipulate this to some extent. With Lena, it's a bit harder, because, obviously, does more damage. Fortress can fix this to an extent, but yeah. Overall, very similar unit. I do think Lena overall can do like what Mercedes and Azama do kind of together. Obviously, I do think Azama does slightly better what Lena does, but not by a whole lot. Okay, really not by a whole lot. At the end of the day, if you like Lena, I mean, plus 10er for those reasons. If you're talking about going for an offensive healer, don't bother with her. Emblem is miles better because she actually has a speed stat to work with. As far as attack, they're basically tied, if memory serves. So, I mean, at the end of the day, Emblem can just go attack plus instead of going speed plus, which Lena has to, unless you really want to go balls deep and go attack plus with like a bunch of speed buffs like joint drive speed. But even then, at the end of the day, Emblem will just be more consistent at speed, or will be able to move that speed to say defense, res, or attack. So overall, that makes her a bit of a better option. Now let's talk about builds. So the set on the left, I will say one thing. Whenever we get attack def solo, that's probably the way to go, because that will be a bit easier to work with. Here we can see Palm Staff in action. Obviously, this is a very good staff. If you want to fix her speed without, you know, going speed plus, it's pretty much the best option you have for it. It basically just gives you 5 speed, def, and res because the enemy will lose 5 attack and speed, which is fairly solid overall. So, this set on the left is just abusing her bulk. Brazen still works, by the way. I'm just saying attack def solo is a bit better because it will always be, you know, active. So even if you overheal over what the brazen seal requirement is, you'll still be fine. You'll still get the effect. And it's multi-phase just like brazen, so that's going to be huge. So as far as stats are concerned, you have 54 attack. Attack speed push pushes that to 61. Low attack rest pushes that to 64. Joint drive attack pushes that to 68. And brazen attack def pushes that to 75. What about speed? 39 plus 7, 46 plus 5, 51. So you have 75 attack, 51 speed. Alright, let's talk about bulk. With brazen attack def, that 38 jumps to 45. So 45, 47. Palm staff pushes that to 50, 52. Low attack res pushes that to 53, 55. So yes, you have 53 def, 55 res effectively, on top of 51 speed and 75 attack. The thing is, while this is good, and the reason why she is still the lowest on the list, is because most healers can already do this. That's kind of the problem with healers in general. I could do a set that's extremely similar to this with Lachesis, because Lachesis has also a very similar stat line to this, which kind of makes me go, I really hope healers will be able to get Resplendent, but I have very little hope. But at the end of the day, I mean, most healers can do this. I'm just showcasing an example of what you can do to really make this work. But again, any healer can actually pull this off. Now on the right is a set that's mostly support, obviously, with Dazzle, Melancholy. Obviously, like, you don't care about damage with Melancholy, you just care about resetting those cooldowns, right? So that's really the idea. Fortress Def Res to push the res a bit higher to make sabotage skills more consistent, and also to just make you bulkier. I've already explained this in many videos already, what the point is to get more bulk on a support unit, but the idea is very simple. I'll repeat it again. The idea is just to be able to take a hit. To take a hit for another unit that might not be able to take it. If you can do that, that makes the healer a lot better, and at the same time, well, or dancer, by the way, at the same time, for healers, it makes Martyr heal for more. Keep in mind, I've put Joint Drive Attack there. Joint Drive Speed is just as good. In fact, it can be better to just block follow-ups. It's really up to you at the end of the day. There's a lot of things you can do with this, okay? I'm just showing one variation of this. Because at the end of the day, if you're going for a support build, there's a million of variation. Sometimes you might prefer Joint Drive Speed. Sometimes you might prefer Joint Drive Attack. It depends on what team you're going to be using the healer in. Joint Drive Attack is just a much more universal skill. Joint Drive Speed is still very much solid, though. So, next up we'll talk about Female Kris. I can already tell most people are going to be like, what? Why not Julian? And the reason is simple. Kris has a lot of competition. After all, when it comes down to sword infantry, it is stacked beyond measure. And that's kind of one of the problems I have with the weapon he's got. Female Kris himself is fine. The problem is, well, I'll talk about it with Female Kris. So, Spurn. I've been asked a bazillion times what are my thoughts on that skill. I'll just say this, it is completely better than Close Call and Repel. Because Close Call and Repel move your unit, and sometimes you don't want to move your unit. The other problem with this is that Spurn is, you know, pretty good for infantry. If you're talking about Close Call and Repel, the pushback and the get the fuck away effect are very good. The problem with that, however, is that they are good on flyers and calves. Guess who can't use Close Call and Repel? Oh, well, ain't that a bitch? The thing is, you could have Repel for, say, Cordelia. And Cordelia would be an amazing user of it because she has plenty of damage because she quads very easily. And also that would synergize into the weapon because it would make it harder for her to fall under 50% HP. Stuff like this would make the skill very good, and Close Call would be absolutely like the best B skill to have on her. The problem is you don't get to have that choice because it's left to infantry units. You know, the type of unit that already has a bazillion skill. Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Very cool, Kanye. Very cool. But, you know, at the end of the day, Spurn is a really good skill. It's just, I'm just more so complaining about Close Call and Repel. Pushing a unit back and getting getting back out can be useful in certain situations. But in a lot of situations with infantry units, you do not want to back out. You do not want to just push a unit away. That's just kind of useless effect that doesn't really bring anything to you. So Spurn is a much better skill. Now, I've heard people bring out that this skill is power creeping Wrath, and it fucking doesn't. There is only one set that this helps, and it's like the noontime set, where, you know, you want to get hit, get pushed under 75, so Wrath would just give you the 10 damage when you instantly proc it back. That's the only time where Wrath is going to be inferior to Spurn. Because in every other situation, the reason why Wrath is so good, okay? The reason that makes Wrath what it is the fact that you get one charge, okay? At the start of the turn when you're under 75%. Now, some people might be like, why? That doesn't sound all that great. To those people, I say you probably have not been playing for too long, but let me explain. It's very simple. If you have a big cooldown special like Aether, getting hurt to under 75% and then backing out until it's ready is a very viable strat, and it allows you to just one-shot units such as Duo Ephraim, Duo Alm, and so on and so forth, which is extremely potent, and also, you know, bypass a lot of kill potential you'd be able to miss. For other units, such as Larse, which honestly is the biggest example here, Larse will be able to just get the charge for Ragnalastra. This is huge because it basically means even if you're dealing with someone that blocks special cooldown, like with Guard or Special Fighter, or, you know, Prized Lance, or the Dragoon Axe, you know, stuff like this, it doesn't matter. If you get hurt at the start of the next turn, Ragnalastra will be ready. Ragnalastra will do an extra 10 damage to basically jump up to 30 damage very easily. That's huge, because it just basically means even if you're dealing with a blue, you might actually just one-shot them. That's just how potent Wrath becomes because of that one charge. And to add insult to injury, because it's a 1 cooldown, because Larse has a cooldown -1 weapon, what ends up happening is you proc it, and if they do not have something like Special Fighter, they'll hit you back, and you'll just proc it again. In which case, even if you did 0 times 2, okay, as long as the damage is doing like plus 30, obviously, like, let's say you're doing 1 times 2 to a unit with 60 HP, it's still dead. Okay, it's still dead. I've killed Brave Hector on a death tile with his Ostean counter A skill with a red like Ira before. Just to give you an idea of how potent this skill is, Spurn will not be able, is just completely unable to do this because it doesn't give you the charge. The charge is just that good. Period. So yeah, Spurn is a decent skill. If the effect that you need is repel, like for example, if you have say dual Ulm, this is his best B slot. Period. Because dual Ulm is the type of character that already was one of the best repel user of the game, because he already has a weapon that basically fixes any problem he has with damage, essentially taking the enemy's defense and adding into his own attack, on top of having Lunar Flash, is huge, obviously. It basically means that he already hits absurd amounts of attack. He already gets a 2 cooldown that will typically do 20 damage or more. So Spurn becomes really good because then, you know, all he needs at that point is sustain. He doesn't need damage, just pure sustain. So, hey, Spurn gives him sustain and a bit of damage here and there. The thing is, never rely on the damage, and I really do mean this, never rely on the damage to get kill. The 5 damage is very small, but also it's very hard to set up. 40% damage reduction makes it harder to go under 75% HP. Wow, we would have thought. I mean, it's fairly obvious, but a lot of people don't really realize this. At the end of the day, if you have a unit that's extremely tanky and fast, using Spurn on them is not exactly the most consistent way to go about it. So yeah. As far as the weapon is concerned, I'm going to say my piece once we get to Female Kris. Though I will say, Rip Shannon, you lived about 4 months before you were completely power crept for everything but Imperial Astra. Sure enjoy that. But I'll go more in detail as to what the weapon does with Female Kris, because Female Kris will actually get built. This is basically a part 1 of 2 when talking about this character, because Female Kris and Male Kris kind of go hand in hand. But I kind of have to go through the intermission chapter known as Julian first. So, yeah. Joint Drive Attack is really nice. I don't understand why he has HP Speed 2. And to the 2 people who goes like, yeah, but you replaced the A slot anyway. All I have to say to those people is, not everyone wants to build a Male Kris. If I get a Male Kris, I'm most likely going to fodder him off out of pure contempt. And the thing is, unless it's an infantry, sword, axe, or lance, I basically get joint drive attack and that's it. Welcome to the problem of foddering these guys. Except in Male Kris's case, he has literally no reason. He should have had a skill like bonus doubler as his A skill. I don't understand why that's not the case, but here we are. It's just kind of disappointing because it makes it just really difficult to fodder joint drive attack on top of something else to someone. Basically, it limits it to a lance, axe, or sword infantry, which is just great, isn't it? I don't get it. I really don't. HP speed is worthless, and it's not like he's gonna demote, so why are you not giving him an actual kit? Is beyond me. I just don't get it. But let's talk about comparison, and oh boy, here you can see why Kris is not that good, and why he's not the second best unit of the banner, in my opinion. He has a really fantastic weapon. I kind of just glossed over it, but basically it's cooldown -1, and basically for the same condition as Larcey. At least I believe so. Let me double check. Oh no, it's literally the same condition as Shannon. If foe initiates combat, which, I mean, whatever. Let's just use the if foe's HP is at 100%, because that other effect is if foe initiates combat is like the most pointless effect. It's very awkward to work with, but you know, thankfully he's not Shannon with something like Imperial Astra, because otherwise this would be a terrible weapon. It works as an enemy phase only effect, and the other choice is still very much a thing. So it works fairly well overall. I will just say, obviously it should have been the Larcey requirement, but whatever. Now, Larcey versus Kris. You can already see here, one less HP for one more attack. Bruh, what a difference. What an all-new and interesting unit. Isn't it funny that he also has basically the Shannon weapon, but better? It's not funny to me, it just makes me die inside every time I look at it. Because his weapon is what the ball monk should have been, basically. But alas, alas. Now, you can see the big problem, though, when it comes on to Kris. Or at least male Kris. Female Kris does not have this problem whatsoever, and you'll see why. At the end of the day, Ragnar Astra, Mayhem Aether. This is the big problem here. I do think if you're going for an Aether set with male Kris, he does something very similar to Ike. Obviously, because he does -5 across the board, right? Ike does not do any like extra stats or anything of the sort, unless he gets debuffed. And then if he gets debuffed, that specific stat will get a buff. So I mean, if you get hit by chill speed or chill attack, good. You know, you are in a good position. The problem is that's kind of just it. It's a bit awkward to work with. It's massive in AR, absolutely and utterly massive. But while it is massive in AR, where debuffs are a lot more prevalent, outside of AR, it is very similar to what Kris does. The thing though is that he has DC, so what you can do is obviously go Res Plus like here, and run Mirror Stance 3 to catch up to some extent. So you end up with 37-37, which is huge. But Blade of Shadow also reduces the enemy's attack speed and defense by 5. Effectively giving 5 across the board. So as far as stats are concerned, with an Aether set, with special spiral, yes, Ike is actually worse than Kris, or at least less consistent as Kris. Though the debuff immunity is huge on Ike, obviously, but at the end of the day, Kris is a bit more consistent, in my opinion. As far as Spur's damage is concerned, though, there is no way around it. Larcey utterly destroys him because Ragnar Astra, period. I will also say, Blade of Shadow removes his penalties. I forgot to mention that. Removing your penalties, yeah, obviously, like, Ike also has something like that to a stronger extent. But, and like, I just want to really show this. Neutralize penalties on unit and inflicts attack speed def -5. So yeah, he does have that. The thing is, removing your old penalty versus removing the enemy's buffs. Which one do you think is the best? Gotta be honest, it's the latter. Completely ignoring enemy buffs and also having a better condition overall than Kris. Not by a whole lot, but it is better. Because at the end of the day, the 100% HP clause is typically what you'll be working with. You know, because obviously. And speed is not exactly hard to reach for Larce. I mean, even here, right? She is attack plus, she hits 51 speed at start of combat with a buff. So Larce's edge is, if anything, very consistent. But yeah, when it comes down to burst damage, Ragnalastra is a flat 20 damage for the most part, okay? And I'm talking at no merges. No merges with attack plus, not speed plus, attack plus, a buff, and a weapon, you are at 50 speed. That's 20 damage, okay? So it only gets higher from there, unless you have speed minus. In which case, it's a bit lower, but might as well be the same. So yeah, 20 damage. And then you had Raph for another 10, that's 30 damage. Kris could do something similar with Ruptured Sky, but unless they're dragons, he's always going to fall short. That's just how it is. So yeah, I do think Kris is overall more consistent than Ike at being a healer. And while there is no build for Kris, let's be honest here, okay? Male, female Kris have the same stat line. They have the same weapon. They have access to every same skills. Every build I'm going to be showcasing with female Kris can be used on male Kris. Okay, that's just how it is. Okay, there's no point in me kicking around the bush and making the same build twice for two characters that are basically the same. Alright? So yeah, I do think if you use Kris, you want to go for an A for set, because that's basically the only thing he has that really works. Again, DPS just doesn't really cut it, Larce does it better. And again, removing enemy buffs is huge, okay? So having Kris here, removing his own penalty is cool and all, but Larce has a better effect overall. And also more consistent. Now I'm gonna move on to Julian. Julian is a bit of a weird one. I did not think he was that great at first. But then I kind of realized that his lopsided def and res is actually to his huge advantage. So let me talk about this and go in comparisons. So, obviously I'm going to compare him to Layla. I do think overall Layla has a better utility than Julian, purely because Constant Dagger is really solid. That said, in AR defense, Layla does not have any effect on her weapon outside of basically Swift Sparrow 2.5. Sorry. So, overall, it's kind of mediocre, I guess is the best way to go about it. If you use Constant Dagger, obviously you're at 63 attack, whereas Julian is at 59, but that's not like he can't raise it up with Broadleaf Fan. There's many other choices. Again, also Constant Dagger does not have cooldown -1, it has speed +3. Therefore, you know, you can make up for the difference in attack very easily through getting a special early, or having debuff on the enemy with Broadleaf Fan. That's not exactly the problem. The problem is mostly his speed, where he is behind by a whooping 11. That's kind of a huge thing, really. As far as bulk is concerned, though, it's nowhere near. Even if you, like, swap the def and res around with Julian to just really showcase the difference, 2 less defense, or 2 less res versus Layla's res, for basically 7 def versus her 31 res. I mean, that's an easy pick. Not to mention, Layla's bulk is too even, so using skills like impact skills can be a bit weird to work with. Especially since you can't really refine her weapon, because you'll be using Constant Dagger. Constant Dagger, by the way, isn't really good weapon. I'm pretty sure I actually pointed out this in my video about Layla, but what she can do that's really obnoxious is basically, she is the best initiator for AR, period. What you can do basically is just smite her in, okay? Then attack a unit, and then obviously have a support with a dancer like Raisin, Peony, and so on. Swap place with said flying dancer, aerobatic into Layla, and then repo her out. Or repo, like, the dancer out, basically. This is insane. The amount of movement you can do out of this is insane. Basically, getting punished for attacking is very difficult with Layla. That's just how it is. Like, it's just extremely difficult to do anything to punish this. So yeah, that kind of makes her very potent on there. Which is AR offense, by the way. So yeah, that makes her really solid. As far as normal maps are concerned, that effect is a bit less relevant, but it's still fairly useful. It still basically means you can move around a lot. Lilith is also a really good combo into her, because she basically can teleport within 3 space to any unit, or any of her support unit. So you can basically just teleport to her after she attacked to just repo. That's also very much an option you can do. Really, there's a lot of things you can do when it comes down to Layla. It's kind of insane, honestly. But yeah, so honestly, Layla is mostly good in AR offense. If you're talking about outside of there, because obviously our dagger is a fire sweep effect, so our bulk is not as important. Julian is able to take a hit on top of having a cooldown -1 weapon, so it's very easy for him to charge specials a lot easier, and his bulk actually allows it very easily. You see the res here, right? The res refine, mirror impact. You're at 38 def, 36 res already. Had buffs and you're at 44, 42, and you can still use a low skill. Attack smoke is very much an option, especially with Broadly Fan. There's just a lot of things you can do with this. Okay, and that makes him very solid. Overall, I'd say he is the best jack-of-all-trade dagger unit, and even compared to Soph, okay, I'll say one thing, Soph is a lot cheaper, right? So if you're building him, obviously he is going to do just fine. I do think Julian is only a small upgrade overall if you're going for a Vantage Broadleaf fan set. After all, there's only 2 attack difference. The 4 speed kind of hurts for Soph though, but it's nothing that you can't like fix with something like Fury, for example. At the end of the day, Soph is very much usable, but at the end of the day, he's also a worse version than Julian. Okay, I will say, while he is a worse version of Julian, and Julian is able to run a lot more things, the main thing that makes Julian again better than Soph is the fact that Soph is basically borderline equal def and res, okay? 28-27 here. That's the biggest problem he runs into, funny enough, because if you want to build him in any other way than an AoE set, okay, which Julian does better, especially with the set I have in mind, which you'll see soon. I mean, if you don't build him for an AoE or Broadleaf fan, which again Julian does better, you can't really go in other ways. Impact skills are going to be hella awkward on him. You basically would need to get, like, say, Mirror Impact, and then use a Def Refine, and then use sturdy like Blow as the seal slot, and even then it would be a bit awkward. It can work, but compared to Julian, bruh, it's not even a competition. It just isn't. But that's kind of what happens when you're a Gen 2 dagger compared to a Gen 4 dagger. Because Gen 2 was a buff of 5 BST with infantry as well as dagger / bows, and then another 5 BST. Like, bruh, why? So Julian has like 167 BST and Soph has like 151. It's a pretty yikes situation. honestly. Now let's talk about build, and I have a few. So, set on the left, obviously that's just the Broadly fan set. I don't think I have to really explain too much how it works. You basically have 72 attack. If you also have something like Brave Lucina, you will be able to proc Ruptured Sky every 2 fights. Really, the idea is just, unlike Soph, you have a bit more bulk to work with. You have more speed to work with, so you don't get doubled. And you have more attack to work with, so you can actually be more consistent. Which can be useful against sturdy impactors, though keep in mind, like, in general, you should want to avoid those. But, I mean, at the end of the day, sturdy impact doesn't matter. If they have to attack you a second time to do it, I mean, Vantage, baby. Still, overall, I'd say this is fairly solid. This is mostly used in AR offense, so can do it as well. Just thought I'd point it out. Set on the right is another reason why I point out, you know, specials. Ignis becomes a 3 cooldown. You get 2 charge when you attack. Well, I mean, at least as long as the enemy doesn't have over 74 attack, and you know, buffs are disallowed. You get attack -3, so I guess it's more like 77 or over 77 attack. Yeah, I mean, at that point, let's just be honest, even if you're at Olgard, you're gonna struggle to keep up. So, you know, you basically hit, get 2 charges, get hit back, and then proc Ignis. This is something that, you know, Layla would not be able to do. If you're running Flashing Blade on Layla, which is really the one you should be running and not Heavy Blade, you'll be able to use Ruptured Sky at best. Here, you're using Ignis, okay? Ignis with 44 defense. That's 35 damage, if you can't math. That's a lot. That's a lot. And a whole lot more than Ruptured Sky would ever do. So yeah, this is extremely helpful for him. As far as bulk is concerned, like I said, Mirror Impact, pretty much a really good skill for him. Basically pushes him to 44 def, 42 res. Low attack def pushes that to 47, 45. Yeah, that's a lot of bulk. That's a lot of bulk for a dagger unit. And he cannot be really doubled. Even if they have quick repose, they basically need to have 54 speed to double you. It's just a mess, honestly. It's just becoming very difficult to just bait him, regardless of what you're going to do. You basically need a very high speed unit to prevent him from doubling you. And if you think, you know, if you think speed is not good enough, low attack speed is an option. So, yeah. Moving on to the second set. Left set is one of the reasons why I think Soph is actually a lot worse than Julian. Really, at the end of the day, it's very simple. Red Hot Ducks is one of the best AoE set for those who don't understand what it is or what it does. This is a weapon that came with Hostile Spring Elise. This weapon basically means that, you know, the Giga Excalibur effect or Nesala's weapon, which basically compares speed, and you get 0.7 damage per speed point that you're higher of the character, stacking up to 7 damage at 10 or more speed difference. This is what it is. This is basically what it is. And the true damage carries over to AoEs. So here you're looking at 73 attack. So let's say you're dealing with someone with 50 defense. You have 23 damage. This jumps up to 34 because of Blazing Wind. They probably won't have 47 or more speed. So let's go with 46 or the whole 7. So basically the 34 jumps up to 41 damage, and that's just the AoE itself on a unit with 50 defense. Okay? Then you follow up with basically 84 attack, because Drain Drive attack and Red Hot Ducks. So 34 damage. You basically did 75 damage to someone with 50 defense. How about someone with 60 defense? Then it would be 13 damage, right? Times 1.5, so 19. Plus 7 from the Red Hot Ducks, so you're already at you know, 26 damage. Go into combat, and then you get another 7 damage plus the drive attack, so 84. That's 24. So 26 plus 24. You do 50 damage to a unit with 60 defense. I think you get the idea. It's very difficult to tank. And even if the enemy has, you know, advantage, you can actually take at least one hit. Typically. Obviously, specials are a different story. Set on the right is basically the same thing, but with flesh, with hardy bearing. Obviously, if you're using this, you cannot use like heavy blade or flashing blade, so it would be better. It would be in your best interest to run barbed shuriken instead. The concept is still the same. You do a bit less damage is all, because you don't have the 7 true damage on the AoE in the following hit. So you're basically losing 14 damage. So if you're dealing with that 60 defense person that you did 50 damage to, you're going to do 36 instead. But at the very least, vantage units will not be able to trip you over. So it comes down to, what do you prefer? This is just AoE builds in a nutshell, by the way. It's either you get more damage, or you block vantage. That's just kind of how it is. As for this set, set on the left is an Aether special fighter set. Special spiral, sorry. I don't think I'm really coming on as I don't think it's ever coming on as a surprise. This is a very good set on very few many. Yes, wow, words. On a lot of units. Here you hit 69 attack, nice as usual. 49 speed, as well as 44 def and 39 res. Pretty good. It basically makes you fairly bulky, and after Special Spiral procced, or Aether procced once, Special Spiral will basically make it a 2 cooldown special. So if you have Brave Lucina, you can just basically be like, I get hit, I proc Aether every time. This is something that Ygritte does to insanely strong amount, to a point that, honestly, if she had been colorless instead of red, she would literally be the best bow unit of the game. This is ridiculous. Ygritte is a really very busted unit, easily able to break the 70 attack, and that's without the weapon in mind. Again, a very insane unit. But yeah, this is a pretty similar set to this, but this is colorless, so it can be a bit better in certain cases. As for the set on the right, this is Hidden Thorns. If you don't know what that is, I don't blame you. This is the weapon that Summer Dorothea has. It basically is the weapon that is once per phase, not once per fucking match, okay? Once per phase, you will be able to get 5 attack, res, and also heal yourself by 7 HP, which is a really good effect. Again, once per phase. So it basically means player phase of turn 1, you will be able to use it on the first fight, and then on the very same turn of enemy phase, you're still going to be able to use it on the first fight there. Then turn 2, player phase, you'll be also able to use it for the first fight there. I hate the fact that I have to explain this every time, but the description is utter garbage, so I have to. So yeah, essentially what this weapon does is fixes res. With this and Mirror Stance, you basically hit 44 def and res, as well as push the attack up to 74, which is really good, and also provides sustain, which is good because this set is not exactly made with, you know, sustain in mind. This is a pure damage set, very similar to the Aether set, but instead of Aether, you're proccing Ignis, because you do not have cooldown -1, so you cannot use Aether. Overall, this is a really good set. You still do 35 damage per proc, and you're actually able to do quite a bit of damage here. 74 attack is a lot more consistent than 69, and you also get Ignis, which is 35 damage instead of Aether, which is inconsistent. So yeah, overall, fairly good unit. And yeah, I will say overall, Soph does two of those sets to an extent. Julian does it better. Absolutely better. There's no denying that Soph is completely worse than Julian. But he is a good budget option of Julian, if you like what you've seen here. At least, you know, for the first, well, actually, these two sets, you can do the one on the right, and this one set, the one on the left. These are the two sets he can do. Now for Female Kris, and oh boy, here comes the problems. So, you know how I was complaining about the weapon itself because of Female Kris? Let me explain why I did this, okay? This weapon was first designed for Male Kris. Male Kris is a sword unit. So obviously, you need a really good weapon to even stand out in the sword unit category. And it's even worse now, in my opinion. It's probably it's honestly a cesspool at this point. Because if you want to be a good unit, if you want to be a unit that stands out in the sword infantry class, you basically need a good special on top of a good weapon, okay? Because you have Lars for damage with Ragnar Astra, you have Fallen Ike with Aether for sustain. It's honestly disgusting. You're basically in this weird places where, hey, if what you want to do is damage, Lars will fuck you over. If you want to do sustain, then Fallen Ike will do you over. I do think Mel Kris ended up pretty lucky because he is very slightly better than Fallen Ike in my opinion with the sustain set, purely because, hey, minus 5 attack speed and def is pretty good. The problem is when you take, literally in my opinion, the second best weapon of the sword infantry class and port it over to a class that is super dry of free unit, to the point where Anna is considered a good unit, when Apotheosis Anna is not exactly a good unit. Not in my opinion. I do think Duo Ephraim is overall better, and also, you know, Duo Hero and all. Well, what ends up happening is you're basically just shafting any chances of like having slow and gradual power creep of the Lance Infantry class. So you have this huge power jump. This is not power creep, by the way. This is a power jump, okay? Of going from Apotheosis Anna, which is something like a bit of extra movement and 5 attack and speed if you have an ally within 2 space or some stuff, or some stupid stuff, to cooldown -1, attack speed def rest +5 because the enemy lose 5 to all stats, neutralizes penalties. Like, bruh, what the hell is this jump? So because they ended up porting one of the best weapon of the sword category, because they have to keep going better and better, instead of just being like, oh, maybe the demote should be a sword unit instead. Which, honestly, that could have been the case. There was no point for them to just sit around and make Male Kris a sword unit. You know why? Because Female Kris is typically depicted to be wielding a sword instead of a lance. If they're going to deviate and make Kris a lance unit, they could have absolutely deviated and make Axe Kris an axe unit and just make it a more underpowered pref. Because we keep getting green demos, okay? We keep getting green demos, Echidna, Ross, and so on and so forth. So, obviously, if you keep getting these, making a new Axe infantry unit pretty decent is fine. Duo Alm is going to be better, but that's fine. That's just expected at this point, okay? I don't mind that. I do not mind that at all. But making him a sword unit basically forces him to have a really good weapon, and if you want both of them to have the same weapon, then it basically screws over Lance Infantry. That's kind of the problem. If you don't understand how balance works, please do not work on this game. That's just how it works. You should have just made Male Kris an Axe unit, okay? It's not like we had a green unit on the banner to begin with. Just saying. Christ. So, yeah, you could have made him a green unit right there, and then make Kris a lance unit, and then tone down the weapon. Because this weapon is insane. And lance infantry, basically the only competition you had were Apotheosis Anna, purely because of lack of competition, and Duo Ephraim, and she is better than both. Another thing that makes this weapon really good is attack speed def -5, okay? Let me explain to you one thing, which is something I did not mention about Larcey versus, you know, Kris, just because at the end of the day, it really comes down to Larcey got special good, and also bonuses being removed is better than penalty ignored. Okay, so stat reduction versus stat buff. Which one is the better one? If you said stat buff, you are just dead wrong. Stat reduction is always better than stat buff. You know why? Because if I am a blue dealing with a green and I get 5 more attack, it gets shafted down to 4 attack because of combat triangle. However, if I make so that the enemy loses 5 defense, I effectively got 5 attack. The spy color advantage. Hey, that's better. Now let's talk about defense. Okay, if I buff my def by 4, it doesn't really matter because the enemy still, you know, gets 6 more attack per 5 attack because of combat triangle. Okay. What happens if I do -5 attack? Well, I basically got myself 6 def and res because of combat triangle. Even if it's a buff of 5, then the fact that I remove the 5 attack on the enemy side means I basically buff myself for 6. So you always get more benefits. The only stats that will not get more benefits, obviously, are going to be speed, because speed is not something that's influenced by combat triangle. So yeah, obviously as a result, hey, having a penalty is just better. That's just how it is. And that's basically what they did with the weapon. So that's another point for this weapon being broken as all hell. As for the rest of the kit, I did not really mention much, so let's move on to comparison, eh? So, boy oh boy, Anna is already worthless. She has already no point in existing. At the end of the day, the only thing Anna really has is a fuck ton of speed. Does that give a lot to her? No, not really. She's not even a good close call user, because yes, she has all the speed to make it work, a weapon gives her more attack and speed, but overall she just lacks damage. She just completely lacks damage. That's the problem with close call in a nutshell. If you cannot have enough attack, don't bother. That's just how it is. If you cannot kill with close call, or repel, or spurn, there's just no point behind it. And since you don't have cooldown -1 on the Apotheosis Spear, because it's all about speed +3, which, why the hell would you do that? Then you cannot really combo this into a good damaging special to make up for it. Kris, on the other hand, is first off reducing the enemy's attack by 5. Anna does not buff her def or res by 5, so that's already a bad start. So if you're comparing the bulk, you're basically comparing 40 defense, 35 res, to 33 def and 36 res. Man, she has 1 more res, but is behind by 7 defense. You see kind of the problem here? Now, as far as speed is concerned, even if Apotheosis Spear is active, even if Spear of Shadow is active, then the difference is only 3 speed. And Kris is already hitting 56 speed with a buff. Again, who cares? 56 or 59 speed, it's both overkill as all hell. It doesn't matter all that much. As far as attack is concerned, Kris does -5 defense, so not only is it a more effective buff overall than having 5 attack and speed buff, because again, combat triangle. Yeah. I think you can see where I'm going with this. You end up with 2 to 3 more attack, depending on if you're dealing with an enemy combat triangle or not, aka green. Yeah, and Kris, on top of being just better overall with just stats, has cooldown -1. So she can actually use something like Bonfire on top of, say, Spurn. So, hey, hello, hit, get hit, proc. You see where I'm going with this? That's kind of the main problem. Ana just does not have damage or consistent damage dealing capability. Kris has every damage capability she needs. That's just kind of what it is. So Ana is pretty worthless as a result. Now, if you're comparing her to, say, Nyla, Nyla is overall a better damage dealer. Let me explain. I will also say one thing about Nyla before I start. She is a beast unit. She needs to be transformed. Her weapon is considering her being transformed right now on the screenshot, so keep that in mind. There's no +2 attack to add. This is just what it is. So, the way Nyla works is that she needs to have people around her to give her extra attack and speed. This is really awkward unless you have at least one dragon on your party, because then grouping the unit around Nyla is a bit harder. It is within 2 space, which is pretty decent. And honestly, still to this day, I cannot believe her weapon is as good as it is. Especially the fact that she's a Gen 2 unit with such a weapon is just insane to me. But, yeah. Overall, this weapon is really solid. It helps her catch up to some extent to Kris. She is still behind, however, the reason why I say she is a better damage burst is because she has a Wodao effect in her weapon, okay? The Wodao effect basically means 10 more damage, and it does not care about combat triangle. So, as a result, Nyla can hit better numbers overall in terms of damage. And as far as bulk is concerned, she is not that far away. In terms of speed, yeah, to some extent, but again, a weapon actually buffs that. If you're comparing with, you know, Kris's weapon, 40-35 versus 38-29, obviously it is better by 2 defense and 6 res, but it's not by that much, which is kind of impressive. At the end of the day, Nyla still gets more damage out of a Moonbow. She does not have access to Ruptured Sky, though, which is kind of a shame, and really makes her very awkward to use in Arena. Please give us a 2 cooldown special that Beast and Dragons can actually use. Thank you. The fact that they're basically locked to Aether and Blue Flame is just absolutely and utterly disappointing. Still, if you use her in tandem with Brave Lucina, with Wrath, or I was gonna say Spurn, but she can't use that, you basically get 45 damage out of that. That's really insane. And that's not exactly something Kris can do. And that's like, again, burst damage. In terms of burst damage, I do think Nyla is overall better. Again, it's purely because you can stack Wrath into Wolf's Queen Fang, and that does just a truckload of damage. But yeah, so that's, again, a very similar situation to Larcey, where Larcey is just completely better when it comes down to burst damage versus Female Kris. But that's just kind of a given for Larcey. Larcey is just, honestly, the best sword infantry unit because burst damage is so essential in a lot of modes. Do I think she is the best for AR? No. In fact, I don't really think you should use a sword unit as a tank in AR, in my opinion. Just too many blues that will basically screw you over. But that's just my opinion. Especially with Ophelia existing, you're basically fodder in front of her for the most part. As far as the firm is concerned, you might be wondering why Speed Plus. It's purely because his attack is already good enough, okay? And the idea behind this is, yes, Kris hit 66 attack, Ephraim 63. That's more attack overall. However, the reason why you want speed on Ephraim, okay, unless you want to go attack plus and then make it up with joint drive speed, which is kind of the same thing as going speed plus but then running joint drive attack, which, I mean, same results. It's just that you get 4 speed from a buff from an attack plus, I mean. I do not know exactly how much. I don't know if you have an attack super boon on Ephraim. If he doesn't, then it's just completely worse than going speed plus with joint drive attack, but that's, you know, those are just semantics at this point. If we're talking about Ephraim himself, he basically only gets an extra follow-up if he has more attack than the enemy. That's it. That effect is still really good, and at the end of the day, Ephraim is really used a lot purely because of the fact that he scores for a 180 BST. Basically means that, you know, more options for him. Kris scores for 175, so, you know. Actually, Ephraim scores for 185 BST, my bad. Duo heroes are 185 BST. So, effectively, Ephraim scores a whole merge above Kris due to BST. So, yeah. The reason you want Speed Plus is to stop enemy follow-ups. The idea behind it is just basically stopping enemy follow-up makes it easier to tank them. I know, shocking. And the effect that he has of giving himself an extra follow-up is multi-phase. Unlike, say, you know, Julia, who has a very similar condition, but is at start of combat, this is not at start of combat, meaning you can have in-combat buffs to make up for the attack difference. This is one of the reasons why Speed Plus can also work, even if you don't have joint drive attack. But yeah, if you're comparing stats just side by side, 66 versus 63, 40 versus 42, so you're behind by 2 def. 35 versus 30, so you're ahead by 5 res. And you're literally 12 speed ahead. Overall, Kris is just a ball of stats, which makes her a lot better. But to put insult to injury with the fact that she's just better than Ephraim in terms of stats, she has cooldown -1 in her weapon. Again! They could have literally scrubbed the cooldown -1 and just make that a lance unit, and then make Female Kris a axe unit with that effect. But again, without the cooldown -1. And it would have been just fine. Obviously, it would have made the unit not as great, but that's fine, because at the end of the day, that's how you do power creep right. You don't want to jump literally 4 years ahead with the situation of lance infantry unit. Now I'm just like, man, I can't wait for Legendary Dimitri to be potentially worse than Kris. A fucking garbage self-insert. Yes, I have a bit of salt about that. But yeah, it's rough. It's really rough. Now, if basically every other lance infantry that's going to be released will have to be compared to Kris. Or blue infantry unit, because obviously beasts can be a thing. Which is just so fucked up to me. I don't want this. I really don't want this, but here we are. The damage is already done. But yeah, when it comes down to Ephraim versus Kris, a measly extra follow-up versus cooldown -1, -5 attack speed def, penalty removal. I mean, yikes. Obviously, Kris is overall better. That's kind of what happens when you have a very lackluster weapon, a lackluster duo skill, that for some reason is limited to 1 per fight, even though it should be every 3 turns, just like Pala and co. But hey, what would I know? It's not me that designed the game. But whatever. Getting a bit heated over here, but yeah. Let's talk about build, shall we? So on the left, this is a burst damage build, very similar to what you would run on a Nyla. Keep in mind, again, I'm pointing this again, Nyla will do this slightly better, but it's marginally better. Just keep in mind, though, that Nyla appeared on a bunch of 3-man banner, so you might have a few of them, unless you kill them for No See Disrupt, for that garbage mode known as AR. Which, personally, I never did. And probably never will. Unless I kill it for Bridal Nyla. I don't know about that, since I do have a spare. But yeah, overall, you know, set on the left, just, I would say this is, you know, it's very good for burst damage, but it should not be the primary build you pulled her for, okay? Set on the right is a bit more like something you should be aiming for. This basically is a set. I'm not even going to talk about stat when it comes down to Kris. I mean, you can see it's 82 attack with 2 procs of Ruptured Sky, okay? It's pretty obvious. I don't think I have to talk about the rest. Anyway, unit on the right, Spurn. Again, this is kind of why Spurn works on Kris. Cooldown -1 plus Brave Lucina works in tandem beautifully. And it just makes it very easy for her to get a bunch of attack and just one shot. Here you have 66 attack, Joint Drive attack pushes that to 70, 75 with Spear of Shadow, and 82 with Brazen attack res. Okay, so 82 attack with a proc of Bonfire. How much defense do you have? 40, so it's 20 extra damage with Bonfire. I thought of putting Iceberg there because Brazen attack res pushes your res to 42, which is higher, so 21 damage. But it's less consistent because, again, Spurn lowers the damage you take, so it may be a bit hard to get under 75% for Spurn to work. So yeah, keep in mind though you have no sustain with this build, so it's not meant to solo. Also, again, pointing this out, for a very obvious reason, Female Kris can use all of this. If you really want to plus 10 your self-insert waifu or husbando, go ahead, okay? That's fine. At the end of the day, it's just keep in mind, every one of these sets can be used on male Kris just as well as female. Set on the left is really the main set I want to talk about Kris. Again, she basically hits 66, 74. Yeah, 74, 79. 79 attack. With Aether. After the first proc of Special Spiral, she's going to be constantly able to proc Aether. Yeah, 44 def and on top of that, 43 res. Pretty good. Actually, 45 defense, my bad, and 44 res. So, that's pretty solid overall. You're fairly bulky at that point. It's very similar to what you would do with Ygritte. In fact, you have a condition that's basically what Ygritte has, except in her case it's a speed check both in combat and out of combat. She has to win one of them, and then the enemy lose 5 attack speed def, as well as you have cooldown -1. She just doesn't have the penalty removal, and the condition again is different. Though honestly, if she had penalty removal on top of everything, bruh, like she is already insane, okay? Our stat line is disgusting, our weapon is insane, our condition is very easy to work with, so I'm fine with the way she is. I'm saying that with a +9 Ygritte, okay? No biases there. I genuinely think she is already fine the way she is. But yeah, this is very similar to what you would do with Ygritte, so hey, that's why it works. The idea is very simple. You basically get hit, you proc Aether with your 79 attack, so you can basically just typically even potentially one-shot a few people. This is obviously using Brave Lucina or Infantry Breath if you want to go for that, but why would you? The idea, again, very simple. The first fight is going to be the hardest one. It's very similar to Bridal Nyla, who is also a fantastic unit and uses a special spiral on top of her weapon to just, you know, have a 1 cooldown Aether. Except in Bridal Nyla's case is you don't need Brave Lucina, which is pretty huge for her. But again, the first fight is always the hardest. After the first fight though, believe you me, Nyla becomes a whole new unit. She becomes extremely difficult to kill. Even if you beat her to 1 inch of her life, she basically will heal back half of her HP back every time. And then if you start not to do basically more than half of her HP, you will just not kill her. That's just how it is. Nyla is utterly disgusting, and I absolutely love it. So yeah, it's the same situation here, except lance and, you know, sword to some extent. The condition on Nyla is a bit easier to fulfill though, I feel like, but can also screw you over if you fail to get the kill, which is typically the case for the first fight you're going to run into. But yeah, pretty solid overall. Set on the right is more of a stance set. This is if you want to have guard on your weapon, and if you're doing mostly AA stuff where, you know, being able to deal with ranged unit is not as prevalent unless you're on Earth Season. Because on Earth Season you have Julia, you have Ulm, so obviously those units are ranged oriented. Fire Season can also have Celica, but Celica is not something you would ever want to deal with in general. So obviously that's not exactly a problem. Because Legendary Celica is just going to eat you for breakfast. She's typically might even be able to double you. If she doubles you, you're dead. If she doesn't, you're basically at 10 HP left. So yeah, just don't bother. Just don't bother. It's just not worth it. So yeah, that's why stance is actually fairly decent. Just again, Earth Season will fuck you over if you tend to just use this even on Earth Season. This is more like another set you can run overall. So what do you get with this? You essentially get 73, 78, 81, 85 attack. Pretty ridiculous, I know. 85 attack, 55 speed. So, you know, good old 85 attack. I'm pretty sure you're going to be one-shotting stuff with this. As far as def and res is concerned, 44, 45. Okay. 47, 48. Because of low attack def. Wait, 47, 48. And then you have the weapon pushing that to 52, 53. Yeah. You are pretty bulky with this. It's very similar to what Julian can reach with Mirror Impact, except this is on enemy phase. Combos really well with Spear of Shadow and so on and so forth. Bonfire here is also fairly solid because you're going to be sitting at 44 defense, so 22 damage. You could also use Iceberg here. Really, at the end of the day, it's interchangeable. So if you run out of Bonfire fodder in some weird dimension, then this is an option for you. Overall, a pretty disgusting unit, which basically doomed any incoming Lance Infantry unit and struggling to just looking even remotely decent, which is just depressing. Completely depressing to me. Especially since, like, we got this, we got Anna, then the one before that was Duo Ephraim, then the one before that was Dancing Berkut, and then Shiro. Like, bruh. The amount of competition that... there was no competition when it came down to Lance Infantry unit. It was basically Ephraim or bust. And even then, Ephraim was not that great, so there was a lot of room to grow. And they just killed all of that room for growing, or just improving in general, in just one unit. I have no idea what they were thinking, but clearly it was not with a brain. That's all I gotta say on that one. In conclusion, Lena is kind of a letdown, which is a shame because I kind of wanted Lena for a while. And she's kind of just like any fucking other healer. And she's not even that good as well in terms of stat. But she can work as a mix of damage and healer and damage and bulk. So basically an Azama with actual attack. Though, obviously, if you're going for a full support set, Azama is overall better, since he's going to typically heal over attacking a lot more. But alas, other than that, she's pretty solid. As far as Kris is concerned, very good sustain, and a bit more consistent than Fallen Ike, but that doesn't mean Fallen Ike is all that much worse. I think they are pretty much equal. It's just that when it comes down to Ike, it's more potential than anything. Being immune to panic is huge in AR, so that already makes Fallen Ike a bit better there. So it comes down to preference, in my opinion. I do think Fallen Ike is overall better, and also a better character, so you know, that does help. When it comes down to Julian, I do think he is the most versatile of all dagger units we've got. Do I think he's required or should be plus 10? Not really, but he's a pretty good one-off if you can get attack plus or rest plus. As for Kris, I'm so disappointed. Female Kris, of course. I'm so disappointed in the way they handled her. And to some extent also very disappointed with the way they handled male Kris. Again, I just think these should have been an axe unit instead of a sword unit. So you could have toned down the weapon without, you know, making them obsolete in the process. But alas, IS does not really think with their brain, they think with their pants and with their money, with their bank accounts, so all about that quick buck and no sustain for the fucking life of this game. I wish I did not want to say that here, but that's kind of just how I feel right now. It is just disappointing to look at. And then you look at Eremia and you're just like, bruh, what happened? It's a major antagonist and you did not even give it a pref. This is not a Traven situation. You could have actually built something here very easily. And even the Traven situation should not have happened to begin with. But I don't know, I guess I'm going to get Traven Jr. known as Eremia. Wahoo. Character I actually wanted for a while because I actually like her design and I like the way she's been handled in her game. Is bad. Yeah. What a surprise that a character I like is bad. That's just kind of how it is. That's just kind of how the cookie crumbles. Pretty sure I was asked at one point, like, if I had seen the data mine, and my reaction was pretty telling. I basically said, like, yes, I have indeed seen everything that I cared for be underwhelming and just depressingly below average. Yes, I did see the data mine. Not exactly my words. My words were actually worse than that, but alas, that's that is how the cookie crumbles. That is sadly how the cookie crumbles. Now to not get a Shadow Dragon / New Mystery of the Emblem banner for the next 10 months. Or year. Wahoo. Wahoo. Meanwhile, FE5 is crying because like less than 20% of its cast is in the game. Feels good, man. Probably going to be Radiant Dawn next, but I keep saying that and it just doesn't happen. I don't know why they prioritize Kris over Jill, but I mean, whatever. At the end of the day, hey, if you like Kris, you're probably happy. Don't let my anger of the character also tarnish your judgment of the character. Personally, I really did not like it. I know a lot of people do like the Kris, but if the Forging Bond is anything to go by for people who have not played the game, yeah, that's kind of how the character is in the game that he's from, so oof. Oof. But yeah, personally I just don't like that. If you like that, that's fine, that's fine. Different opinion for different folks, that's just how it is. But yeah, I think I've said my piece when it comes down to this. Next banner, what? Next for review, or video I should say, will be the Sacred Seal tier list update. Don't think it's going to be out tomorrow. I might just try to relax again. I really have not been relaxing enough lately, so you know. Other than that, you can see me play other games on like Discord. I typically stream just whatever I'm doing while working on new banners or new videos. So if you guys want to see that, just join Discord, I guess. Um, just know I'm a bit more of a I'm a bit more open when it comes down to talking on Discord. So I'm a bit of a different person on there, but yeah, I guess that's just kind of how it is. What can I say? I'm still human behind the robot, I suppose. But yeah, I believe I've covered everything I wanted to cover, so I'm gonna call it here. Hopefully this was enlightening to some, and, well, I'll be seeing you all next time. Have a nice rest of the day, everyone.